I'd like to tell you about the year we lived on Armitage Lane. It was a beautiful street in a sprawling suburban development called Willow Ridge, the kind of place where every lawn was perfectly mowed and every mailbox stood at attention like a tiny soldier. My wife Melissa and I had just moved from a cramped apartment across town, and we were thrilled to finally have a driveway, a backyard, a grill. Our little girl Ava was 3, and she loved the big oak tree in the front yard more than any toy we'd ever bought her. Life felt like a postcard. The first time I noticed something wrong was about 3 weeks after we moved in. I was out front, raking leaves into a tidy pile, when I heard Ava talking to someone. Her voice had that strange, serious tone kids use when they're talking to an imaginary friend. I looked up and saw her standing at the base of the big oak, her hand pressed flat against the bark. "Who are you talking to, sweetie?" I asked. She turned, and her face was blank for a second, like she had to remember who I was. Then she smiled and said, "The man in the tree." I laughed. "There's no man in the tree, baby." "Yes, there is," she said, pointing up at the branches. "He sleeps there, he told me." I looked up. Just leaves, wind, late afternoon light falling through the gaps. I told her it was just her imagination, and she ran off to chase a ladybug. I didn't think about it again until that night. Ava woke up screaming at 2:47 a.m. That was the first time. There would be many more. We ran into her room, and she was sitting up in bed, eyes wide and wet, pointing at the window. "He knocked," she said. "He knocked, and I said stop, and he wouldn't stop." The window was shut, locked. The curtains were still. I opened the blinds and looked out at the backyard, which was silver under the moon. Nothing, no footprints in the dew, no branches tapping. I held her until she fell asleep again, and I told myself it was just a nightmare, a bad dream, normal for a 3-year-old in a new house. But the next night at exactly 2:47 a.m., she screamed again. This time she said something different. "He wants to come in." "But he can't, because the doors are magic." The doors are magic. That phrase sent a cold current down my spine, and I didn't know why. Melissa wanted to call a pediatrician. I wanted to call a locksmith. I compromised by doing neither and checking all the locks myself. They were fine. Ava stopped talking about the man in the tree during the day. She played in the yard, ate her dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets, watched her shows. But every single night, every night for 2 weeks straight, she woke up at 2:47. And every time the story changed just a little. He was wearing a suit. He had no eyes. His mouth was sewn shut. His hands were long. He stood right outside the window, but he couldn't step on the grass. "Why can't he step on the grass?" I asked one morning, trying to sound casual. "Because it's not night time for the ground," she said, perfectly matter-of-fact. I won't pretend I didn't get scared. I'm a grown man, an engineer for Christ's sake, but there is something about your child describing a visitor with such quiet, consistent detail that breaks something in your rational mind. I started sleeping on the floor of her room. I bought a nightlight that looked like a rocket ship. I told her it was a dream shield. For 3 nights she slept through. I actually thought I had won. I remember sitting at the kitchen table on a Saturday morning, drinking coffee, watching cartoons with Ava, feeling like a hero dad who had vanquished the boogeyman with sheer paternal presence. Melissa was upstairs doing laundry. The sun was warm. The birds were singing. Then the phone rang. It was Mrs. Garrison from 3 houses down. She was an older widow, lived alone, kept to herself. We'd only exchanged hellos at the mailbox. Her voice on the phone was thin and frayed, like a rope about to snap. "Mr. Vance," she said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly." "Sure," I said. "Has your daughter been talking to anyone, a man?" I didn't answer right away. The silence on the line stretched out, and I could hear her breathing fast and shallow. "She's been having nightmares," I said carefully. "Why do you ask?" Mrs. Garrison let out a sound that was half sigh, half sob. "Because my husband passed away 22 years ago, Mr. Vance. And your little girl walks over to that tree every afternoon, and she puts her hand on it, and I can see her lips moving from my kitchen window. And my husband used to do the same thing when he was a boy. He put his hand on that tree. He talked to someone too." I felt a cold hand close around my spine. "Mrs. Garrison, what did your husband say about it?" A long pause. Then she whispered, "He said the man in the tree told him the house couldn't keep him out, not forever. He said the man was waiting for the doors to stop being magic." I hung up. I wanted to tell myself it was a coincidence, a grieving widow making connections where there were none. But that night I didn't sleep on Ava's floor, I stayed up. I sat on the couch in the living room, lights off, watching the front yard through the window. I wanted to see him. I wanted to prove to myself that there was nothing there. At 2:47 a.m., Ava screamed. I ran faster than I have ever run in my life. I threw open her door and she was standing on her bed, back against the wall, shaking. The window was open. I had checked it 30 minutes before. I always checked it. And now it was open, wide open, the white curtains billowing inward like ghosts. "Daddy," she said, and her voice was not a child's voice. It was flat and hollow, like sound coming from a deep hole. "Daddy, you want to meet him?" And she pointed at the corner of the room. I turned and looked. At first I saw nothing. Just the corner where her pink unicorn nightlight cast a soft glow against the wallpaper. But then the light seemed to dim, as if something was standing in front of it. And I saw a shape. Tall, too tall. Its shoulders almost touched the ceiling. It didn't move. It just stood there, still as a photograph, and I could feel it looking at me even though I couldn't see a face. I grabbed Ava and ran. We spent the night at a hotel. Melissa thought I had lost my mind. She asked me what I saw. I couldn't tell her. How do you tell your wife that you saw a shadow that was too tall in a corner that had no shadow before? How do you explain that your 3-year-old talked to it and the thing nodded back? We moved out the next weekend. Broke the lease. Lost the deposit. I don't care. We live in an apartment now, 4th floor, no trees anywhere near the windows. Ava sleeps with a nightlight shaped like a ladybug. She hasn't woken up screaming since we left. She hasn't talked about the man in the tree at all. I thought that was the end of it. Then last night I was tucking her in. She looked up at me with those big dark eyes and she smiled. Not her smile. It was too wide. It stretched too long. "Daddy," she said, "he says thank you." "What?" She giggled, a real giggle, but it sounded wrong, like singing through water. "For the new tree. He says now he's always close. He says the magic doors ran out and now he can follow." And tonight at exactly 2:47 a.m., the living room window opened by itself. I live on the 4th floor. There is no tree out there, but I can hear something stepping onto the sill.